Welcome to today's deep dive. So imagine for a second that you're walking into a dark, really cramped music venue.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, exactly. The air smells like stale beer and sweat, you know the vibe. You've paid for a ticket to see live music, and your brain has already loaded up all the standard expectations.
Right, the usual routine.
Exactly. You're waiting for the lead singer to step up to the mic, soak up the spotlight. You're waiting for the guitarist to rip a solo. Maybe the bassist cracks a joke with the crowd. It is a super familiar ritual.
Luckily.
But the lights go up, and instead of a normal band, you are confronted by these anonymous figures wearing bizarre, grotesque masks that just completely distort their features.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they aren't looking at you. They aren't hyping up the crowd at all. And the sound coming off the stage, well, the best way to picture this is trying to tune an acoustic banjo right in the middle at an active steel mill.
That is quite the image. But it really completely shatters the fundamental social contract of a concert, doesn't it?
Oh, completely.
I mean, we are so socially conditioned to expect artists to offer themselves up for consumption. We expect them to stand there and basically say, here is my heart. Please understand me.
Right, yeah, the vulnerability aspect.
Exactly. And this group is stepping on stage and broadcasting the absolute opposite message. They're essentially saying, you don't know us, we refuse to be known, and we are absolutely not here to be understood.
It's just such an aggressive rejection of the spotlight, and honestly, that specific refusal to play the game is what sparked today's deep dive into our stack of sources.
It's a fascinating topic.
It really is. I was reading a column recently from MMR that's Monumental Movement Records, and it explores the history of the San Francisco underground music scene. The author spends a lot of time deconstructing this highly secretive, legendary avant-garde musical collective that emerged in the late 1980s.
Yeah, a really vibrant time for the underground.
Right, and this group, they actively defy logic, they completely shatter genre constraints, and they refuse to even maintain a fixed identity. They are known as Caroliner.
Or Carolina Rainbow, depending on which specific fragmented physical release you happen to be holding.
Yeah, true. I've also seen the alias Carolina Rainbow Hernia Milk Queen, which is, quite the mouthful.
It definitely is.
They are notorious in the DIY scene for this extreme, almost militant dedication to anonymity. They use these absurdly long, constantly mutating names, and they hide their faces. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because my immediate reaction to reading about them was just utter confusion regarding their longevity. I mean, how does a collective survive for literally decades while actively hiding who they are?
It's a great question.
Right, because they are intentionally making music designed to alienate people. In any normal context, that is just professional self-sabotage.
It seems completely counterintuitive, yeah. Especially in our modern context where visibility is basically currency.
Yeah.
But that paradox is what makes them such a profound case study. This isn't just a nostalgic look back at an obscure underground project. What's fascinating here is how the MMR column outlines that this collective built a massive, almost mythical, legendary status, not in spite of their invisibility, but specifically through it.
Through the invisibility, wow.
Yeah, their cultural power doesn't come from being famous. It comes from being fundamentally unclassifiable.
So before we can even wrap our heads around who they are or who they refuse to be, we kind of have to start with the actual sound, because the music itself acts as this massive barrier to entry.
Oh, absolutely. The sound is the front line.
Yeah, and the MMR column lists the genres they theoretically dabble in, and it honestly gives you whiplash just reading it. We've got experimental, we've got noise, industrial,
Right.
and then completely out of left field bluegrass.
Bluegrass is the linchpin of the entire philosophical project, honestly. It's the wild card that turns a standard noise project into something deeply unsettling.
But it makes absolutely no sense on paper. I mean, bluegrass is porch music.
Yeah, very traditional.
Right, it relies on acoustic instruments like fiddles, banjos, mandolins. It's grounded in this deep communal heritage. It's music that families pass down on the back porch,
Keep pulling on that thread, though, because the contrast is very deliberate. Bluegrass represents historical roots and clear melodic storytelling.
Yeah.
It is an incredibly human, organic genre. Now, contrast that with noise and industrial music.
Total opposites.
Exactly. Those genres are products of the mechanical age. They are defined by total rejection of traditional melody. They utilize distortion, feedback, synthetic textures, and harsh machinery.
So taking an organic porch music genre and throwing it into a mechanical grinder that isn't just a quirky aesthetic choice.
Not at all. When Caroliner takes these traditional bluegrass elements like a twangy acoustic riff or a folk melody and intentionally buries them under punishing layers of static and distortion, they are enacting a real-time sonic deconstruction.
Wow, okay.
They are taking the past and subjecting it to the hostility of the present.
It's almost like they're building a house out of Lincoln logs right in front of you, just so they can show you exactly how it looks when a bulldozer drives through the living room.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. And what the MMR source points out is that this fusion creates a permanently unstable acoustic environment.
Unstable? How?
Well, because they're constantly tearing down the musical form while you're trying to listen to it, they escape genre entirely. They aren't just a bluegrass noise crossover band.
Right, they aren't just mashing two things together.
Exactly. They exist in a void outside the traditional map where traditional music is dismantled by noise until there is literally nothing left to categorize.
Man, to physically produce a sound that constantly collapses in on itself like that, a standard four-piece rock band isn't going to work. Like, four guys practicing in a garage cannot sustain that level of conceptual instability.
Definitely not. Form follows function.
Right. The actual human architecture of the group has to mirror the chaos of the noise they make.
If the music refuses to sit still, the membership cannot sit still either.
Let's look at how they actually pull that off, because the source material is really fascinating here. The absolute unbending rule of Caroliner is anonymity. No faces, no fixed lineup.
Right?
But there actually is a distinct, deliberate framework holding all this chaos together. It's not just a free-for-all where random people walk in off the street, pick up an instrument, and start making noise.
No, there's a surprisingly rigid skeleton beneath the fluidity.
Yeah, the source identifies one constant center of gravity, a single figure known only by the pseudonym Grux.
Okay, yeah.
Over the decades, Grux serves as the anchor. He guarantees the continuity of the project and seems to dictate the overarching conceptual direction, but orbiting Grux is this revolving door of contributors.
It's a huge list over the years.
It really is. The MMR column lists a bunch of names that have drifted through. Brandon Kearney, Chris Cooper, Darcy Megan Stanger, Greg Turkington, Jess Goddard, Phil Franklin, and Laura Allen.
Right, Laura Allen.
Yeah, the text actually makes a specific point to note that Laura Allen played a crucial role in their vocals and performance.
The vocal element is such a vital component here. Because in this kind of deconstructed music, the human voice is often the last recognizable lifeline for the listener.
That makes sense. You look for something human to hold on to.
Exactly. But Caroliner usually distorts the vocals or uses them as just another instrument of chaos, rather than having a traditional lead singer delivering lyrics. Laura Allen's contributions really heightened that disorienting effect.
Okay, but I have to push back on the structure a bit.
Oh, okay.
Because reading through this, a question kept popping up in my head. If Grux is the center of gravity, right?
Uh-huh.
If he's the guy steering the ship and acting as the sole constant over 30 or 40 years, isn't this really just a solo project?
I see where you're going.
Like, Nine Inch Nails is essentially Trent Reznor with a glorified, rotating backing band. How is Caroliner's setup philosophically any different from that?
On a surface level, yeah, the comparison makes sense. But it actually misses the core mechanism of how Caroliner operates. The MMR author specifically describes Caroliner as an acoustic community, which is a very deliberate choice of words.
An acoustic community. What does that actually mean in practice, though?
Well, let's use your Nine Inch Nails example. Trent Reznor operates as a traditional focal point. He writes the music, he dictates the vision, and the backing band is hired to execute that singular vision perfectly on stage.
Right, he's the boss.
Exactly. The center controls the perimeter. But in Caroliner, Grux merely provides the arena. He's the gravitational pull that keeps the concept from flying apart into absolute nothingness.
Okay.
But it is the constantly shifting perimeter, the peripheral members like Chris Cooper or Laura Allen, who actually generate the friction. They are the ones causing the evolution of the sound.
Ah, okay, I see the distinction. So Grux builds the sandbox, but he doesn't tell the other kids what castles to build.
Precisely. It is a paradox of design. You have a clear, fixed center existing simultaneously with absolute fluidity. If Grux wasn't there, the band would have evaporated in 1989. But if the rotating members weren't constantly injecting new chaos, the band would have solidified into something predictable and boring. The perimeter creates the instability, and that instability is what made them legendary.
And this philosophy of erasing the ego, of operating as this fluid network rather than a static group of rock stars, it bleeds directly into their live shows. It turns what we would normally call a concert into an anti-performance.
It is the visual manifestation of their audio deconstruction.
Let's talk about the physical reality of standing in a room with them, because the details in the text are just wild. When Carolina performs, they utilize massive, bizarre costumes and elaborate, grotesque masks.
Very visually striking.
Yeah, and the source emphasizes that the physical bodies of the performers undergo complete depersonalization. They aren't acting like humans playing instruments. They move in these disjointed ways that carry no inherent meaning. Just ritualistic repetitions and fragments of movement.
They are actively erasing the individual from the stage.
But look at this from the perspective of an audience member, right? Let's say you buy a ticket and stand in that dark room.
Okay.
The performers are hiding their faces, they are acting like anonymous cogs in an industrial machine, and they are actively refusing to provide any shared meaning.
Hmm.
Honestly, why even have an audience?
It's a fair question.
Like, if you despise the concept of human connection that much, why not just play in a basement to a brick wall?
Well, to answer that, we have to look at why humans gather for live music in the first place. Think about the psychology of a typical concert. You go to feel a shared emotion.
Sure, yeah.
The artist on stage sings about a universal human experience, a broken heart and an existential dread, a moment of joy. You listen, you remember your own experiences, and suddenly a bridge of empathy is built between you, the artist, and the thousands of other people in the room.
You relate to them.
Right. You are interpreting their art through your own emotional lens.
It's a transaction. The artist gives emotion, the crowd gives validation.
Yes. But the MMR column breaks down how Caroliner's use of masks and anonymous bodies turns the musicians from individuals with feelings into mere function.
Functions, yeah.
By refusing to offer a clear message, by replacing familiar gestures with meaningless repetition, they take a pair of scissors and violently cut that bridge of empathy. They leave the audience stranded.
Because you can't connect with a function.
You cannot. And by denying you that connection, they force you into a psychological corner. Because there is no message to interpret, you can't passively consume the show. You can't stand there and analyze what Grux might be feeling in his personal life.
Right, because you don't even know who he is.
Exactly. They force the audience to purely experience the physical event.
Mm-hmm.
It's a deliberate rejection of shared meaning. You aren't there for a transaction. You're there to be subjected to the sonic and visual architecture they built.
Wow. It's like standing in an open field while a massive tornado touches down. You don't stand there trying to interpret the symbolic meaning of the wind or, feeling empathy for the clouds.
No, definitely not.
You just experience the overwhelming physical reality that a tornado is happening to you in that exact moment.
That is the perfect analogy for their live performance.
Mm-hmm.
And that pure, uncompromising physical reality is what makes the live shows an underground legend. I mean, people don't forget the tornado.
No, they don't. But this brings up a massive logistical challenge that I really want to dive into.
Okay, what's that?
If their live shows actively reject structure and their sound is a chaotic deconstruction, how on earth do they approach releasing recorded music? The entire point of a record is to capture a moment, polish it, and preserve it in a completed, consumable form for the future.
The short answer is that they treat their discography with the exact same hostility toward tradition as they do their live shows.
And the timeline the column provides really highlights this. They point out Carolina was born in the late 80s, right in the thick of the San Francisco DIY cassette culture.
A very specific era.
Yeah, and from the very beginning, they purposely stayed entirely outside of standard commercial distribution. They avoided traditional record labels and mainstream record stores entirely.
They chose to exist in the underground of the underground.
Let's put this into perspective for you listening, because the mechanics of how music distribution worked back then are crucial to understand this. Today, a band records a track on a laptop, hits a button, and it is instantly on Spotify.
Instantly everywhere.
Right. It's available to billions of people, even if those billions ignore it. The infrastructure of visibility is automatic. But in 1989, staying out of commercial distribution wasn't just a quirky choice. It was an immense logistical hurdle.
It required a massive amount of physical labor. You had to physically dub cassette tapes one by one in your living room.
Right. You had to rely on localized word of mouth. You relied on Xerox zines, mail order catalogs, and tape trading networks. You literally had to put a stamp on an envelope to get your music into someone's hands.
It was incredibly tedious.
So, to remain entirely invisible, to refuse all mainstream press, while still physically distributing enough tapes to build a decades-long legacy that requires a staggering amount of underground coordination.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the DIY ethos. The effort required to maintain the mystery was likely harder than the effort it would have taken to just sign an indie record deal and do a press tour.
I bet. And the physical artifacts they did release are wild. Throughout the 90s, they were pumping out these obscure cassettes. In the 2000s, they moved into CDs and reissues, maintaining this intermittent, unpredictable stream of activity all the way into the 2010s.
Yeah, they never really stopped.
And the titles of these releases offer absolutely no comfort or clarity. The source mentions titles like Rise of the Common Woodpile, All Her Paths Are Peaceful, and The Pegging of the President.
Titles that give you absolutely zero indication of what you're about to subject your ears to.
None at all. Trying to understand this band through their recorded output is just a maddening exercise. It isn't like looking at a standard band's discography, where album 2 naturally builds on the themes of album 1.
Right, there's no narrative arc.
Exactly. Exploring Caroliner's releases is like stumbling across a diary that spans 40 years, but someone has ripped out 90% of the pages.
That's a good way to put it.
You find a torn page from 1992, and then a crumpled half page from 2005. None of the sentences finish. Nothing connects cleanly.
The author of the MMR piece frames this beautifully, actually. None of their releases are intended to have a completed form.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think of a traditional album as a finished painting. It is framed, signed, and hung on a wall in a gallery for people to admire. A Carolina release is not a painting. It is a blurry photograph of the painting supplies being thrown against the canvas.
Whoa!
Yeah, it's just a continuous fragment of sound generation.
It's evidence of the process rather than a polished product.
Yes, exactly. And this brings us to the crux of their entire historical legacy. The text notes that their timeline isn't defined by distinct, easily categorized eras. It is formed purely by continuation.
Just keeping it going.
Right. They have sustained this fragmented, chaotic stream of sound for nearly 40 years without ever stopping to explain themselves or package it neatly for mass consumption.
So when the source article asks why this specific difficult band is considered legendary in the San Francisco scene, what is the definitive answer?
Yeah, it boils down to the rarest combination in art, the immense longevity paired with total, uncompromising invisibility.
Longevity and invisibility.
Yes. If Grux and his rotating cast had done this for 6 months in 1989 and vanished, they would be a minor footnote, a weird avant-garde prank.
Sure.
But because they maintained this fluid, chaotic orbit for decades, refusing to cash in, refusing to unmask, refusing to cater to the industry's demand for a product, they cultivated an aura of impenetrable mystery.
The longer you successfully hide, the bigger the myth becomes.
Exactly. They managed to exist completely outside the machinery of the music industry. They operated as ghosts haunting the underground. And you cannot fight, co-opt, or commercialize a ghost.
Stepping back and looking at this whole picture, the MMR column really introduces a spectacular paradox here. Carolina is a band with no fixed face. They are an architectural structure with a solid anchor, Grux, that only exists to facilitate total, swirling chaos around it.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And sonically, they take the most grounded, communal, acoustic music imaginable, American bluegrass, and use it as the raw material to destroy the very concept of musical tradition.
They hold up a mirror to the absurdity of our desperate need to categorize and label art.
Before we wrap up today, I want you to think about the world we live in right now. The contrast between Caroliner's philosophy and our modern reality is staggering.
It really is. Look at the current landscape. We live in an era defined by hypervisibility.
Oh, absolutely.
Every artist, every creator, and frankly, every regular person with a smartphone is under immense pressure to build a transparent, highly curated personal brand. The expectation is that you share your morning routine, your behind-the-scenes struggles, your trauma. Your literal face is your main currency.
The golden rule today is authenticity. But in practice, authenticity usually just translates to relentless oversharing.
Yeah.
You have to feed the algorithm every single day just to prove you exist.
And Carolina proves the exact opposite. They are a 40-year case study proving that true longevity, deep fascination, and undeniable legendary status might actually be achieved by doing the exact reverse.
Yeah.
It might come from completely erasing your ego, hiding your face, stripping away the personal you, and allowing the chaotic, unpolished, uncompromising work to speak entirely for itself.
It's a massive challenge to how we operate today. It makes you wonder, what would actually happen if we applied that level of fierce anonymity, that utter refusal to explain ourselves to our own creative pursuits? Would we fade into total obscurity, or would we finally become completely free from the pressure of the spotlight?
It is a terrifying thought for most creators, but fundamentally a profoundly liberating one.
It really is, kind of like stepping into that dark venue and just letting the sheer noise wash over you without trying to figure it out. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden architecture and sonic chaos of Caroliner. Keep asking questions, keep challenging the noise, and keep exploring the underground. We'll catch you on the next one.